Anthony, I'm an old man. Are you familiar with Twitter behavior where sports fans reply to national beat writers something like announce Correa to the Yankees or announce Olsen trade to the Red Sox, as if the reporter is the author of these events, not the messenger? I wonder if this indicates anything to you regarding the relationship people have to CNN and the media they distrust and resent. It indicates to me that people have a childlike relationship as child growing into teens resenting their parents, says Anthony. I'm not sure. I mean, I think oftentimes people are just like joking and want to get likes and whatever.
Yeah, so it's like, first of all, I don't watch any cable news. I think it's bad and a waste of people's time. And basically, like, the CIA has like an attention economy, sort of like get people's time waste on stuff. Would be watching cable news. But that said, I think people are a bit too precious about like, oh, I don't get any news from that. I don't get any news from this. Like, the point about bias in media is to understand it so you can understand how it's coloring the information that they give you, right? Like the New York Times, you're ultimately going to need to get some information from there, but also know that it is slanted for, and they have expressed this in the past like 5 years, capitalism. They literally say they're a pro-capitalist paper, right? But you can't just all of a sudden not deal with the New York Times at all, because it is still the paper of record. And
it's still, it serves an important function if it's supposed to, when it operates as it's supposed to.
They also like hire good journalists too, like apart from what the ownership thinks, like that this is an information producing enterprise. And I think people are, a little bit in media literacy. It's like, oh, I don't ever read anything from, and you see this most rancidly on the conservative side, right?
Yeah.
Where they're like not reading anything but Breitbart and Fox News, and even Fox News is probably too liberal for them now. So I think if maybe that's what the Eimer's getting at, I agree that people need to be a bit more grown up and adult about digesting media.
I don't know if I said it on this show last week or if it was my own show last week, but I recall very recently bringing up how like people really have very bad media literacy in general. And that's not obviously a knock at them. I mean, unless you're working in this field, I mean, I guess you can't expect the average everyday person to go about doing their own job and then understand, I should say, someone else's and how that works. But this country especially has a really bad misunderstanding of the media and how journalism works. And, one example I always go to, because it seems so obvious, is that there are people who believe that journalists just put down, refer to people who give them information as sources just so they could say something and make it up without attributing it to someone who is real, without realizing that, no, the only reason you can get this information sometimes is by not attributing it to a person who has to hide behind an anonymity, because otherwise they couldn't give a journalist this information. That's something you often see online where, if something says sources say, or a source told someone, you see people say, you just made this up, or, I don't believe you. Name your source.
Right.
But they actually, like, there's a problem in sports journalism where they do a little bit too much of that unsourced reporting stuff. And it's basically just PR for...
Adam Schefter just did this. I mean, I tweeted this out. Adam Schefter tweeted out that Dalvin Cook was the victim of a extortion attempt when they wanted to get out ahead of the story that both parties, Dalvin Cook and his ex-girlfriend, are claiming domestic abuse. But with all of that said, I just want to formally welcome Brandon to the show because he got a haircut. And that was the first thing I noticed. That's the only reason I'm saying hello to you.
I'm only allowed back because I have a haircut now. Yeah.
We said, we have
that's the rule on the show. You can't have long hair on the show. It's just too much for us to handle.
Yeah, it's definitely
not allowed.
Too much for me to handle. It makes my head feel hot. I feel way better. I mean, but just to the conversation about media literacy, I kind of picked up on the last little bit of what the IM said. I think that it's kind of a difficult line to thread sometimes, because there's a version of advocating for media literacy that I think I mentioned this on the show when we talked about it last, that is just like completely shifting the burden of keeping accuracy in journalism onto the people who read it and the consumers, which, sort of like beta testing articles before someone fact checks them as wrong and then like hurriedly ushering out a correction. When in reality, media literacy, I think, more requires understanding the underlying cause for why certain articles and certain institutions are incapable of doing good journalism. Otherwise, you're just talking about how do we justify including people into a system that is just like not working.
Right.
Right. No, I agree with that as well. And to what, Matt and Emma were saying before too, to me, corporate PR is a little bit different when they ask like a journalist to, this is on background or off the record, so you can't source it to them or attribute it to them. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about like, an employer at an organization giving a reporter, inside information because they think the public should know something about this organization they work for. That's what I mean when I'm attributing that. But yeah, it could definitely go both ways, and it is a real problem due to as Brandon brought up before too, corporate media taking, just not doing a good job at their own profession that they claim to uphold, and they end up muddying the waters for everybody.
Right.
Well, yeah, because especially I really think like print, I would distinguish print from cable television, which cable is just there to give you the feeling that you've been informed long enough to keep watching their advertisements. And there's a degree to which that obviously influences print as well. But like the amount that is jettisoned from cable, I just think and I hate like when I have relatives that are like, oh, they're trying to impress, because they know what I do for a living. They say like, oh yeah, I've been keeping up. I've been watching CNN and I've been watching Fox. They're watching all of them, right? And it's like, you should be watching none of those actually. Like, don't watch Fox News and MSNBC. Don't watch that. Watch better content, frankly, unless of course Sam's on.
Well, I know. I mean, I feel badly like that there are so many well-intentioned people in my life that think they're impressing me with statements like that, where it's just that actually you're making me think less of you.
Yeah, like, well, it's like you've been sold, like you've been sold the myth about cable news, and really like that wasn't even true back in like the Cronkite era, right? Like and it's even less true now. The people are less scrupulous and more mercenary, I think, than they were back in the old days, even if it's less monopolized. And so people just got to learn, like, if you want information, you got to go to like probably some kind of print publication, honestly.
I also, sorry, go ahead.
No, it's okay. Go, Brandon.
No, I think just Matt's last point there. Let's go, Brandon. AKA now, thank you, Brandon. And of course, Brandon is superior.
Brandon is always right, obviously. Yeah.
But no, I mean, I think to Matt's point, we have kind of, through the lens of neoliberalism, prioritized individual journalists and pundits' ability to, like, quote unquote, be journalists over doing journalism in any way that is coherent and in a sense of the public interest. Because I mean, I think back to when, I mean, it happens a bunch of times, but back to when, oh my God, who is I guess it was either Woodward or Bernstein sat on that Trump information to put in his book under the understanding that, well, yeah, this is going to be the selling point of my next book that came out, as opposed to putting out that information publicly about what he said about coronavirus at the time. And, we've seen this idea that it's within the realm of acceptability for journalists to prioritize their job at any individual journalistic institution over what is, arguably their job to disseminate the truth, under what I would say is this kind of, well, sometimes they are allowed to say the right thing, sometimes they can't. But if they sit on information, it's all for the greater, purpose of one day exposing what can be the truth. And I mean, take it with a grain of salt, but the whole like back and forth where it's like, what appears in the Washington Post isn't what the writer is saying on, Twitter or their social media feeds. Like, they can play it both ways. Like, I think that, again, sometimes when we prioritize the ability for people to, expand their career in journalism, we do so at the, the sacrifice of individuals who rely on that particular person or institution's ability to like freely disseminate information, essentially not doing that. Because I remember back to when like Bernie implied that the Washington Post, which it is kind of a rag because they are funded by billionaires, and every, pundit, whether they identified as like, center left to like far right, was like, how dare Bernie imply that Jeff Bezos tells us what to write? It's like, that's not what he said. And it's ridiculous to even imply that he said that, because, everyone wants to bring Noam Chomsky on to like get his views on shit, but hasn't read Manufactured Consent. But like, that was just kind of an acceptable thing that people could do under the auspices. Like, well, yeah, we know they have to play ball to keep that job.
They made the bar really high so that they were able to clear it.
Of course.